Hey there, Elliot. Just wanted to let you know that I got in just fine. I'll text you as well because I'm not sure you're needing to pay attention to this. You have more important things to be dealing with. Okay? I'm the host. I've got it. I'll set the recording. I'll share the recording to Luis. We got this.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Go take care of the things you need to take care of. I hope she's safe. I hope you're safe.
I hope she's good too. I'm going to try to leave and text me if it cancels the meeting, and I'll start it back up again.
Noted.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Bye. Be well. Good morning, everybody. We've got a few minutes to go before the webinar starts, so settle in, perhaps pick your beverage of choice for this morning. Look forward to talking with you today. All right, it is almost 11 a.m., so we'll be starting on time. I'll start that recording in just a moment. In the meantime, I'm hoping you're having a wonderful morning. Hope this last week's been good to you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'll start the recording for us. Okay. Well, good morning and welcome to our latest episode of Wild California, a webinar provided and hosted by the Dominguez Rancho Adobe Museum with the assistance of the California Naturalist Program. Before we get started today, I would first, as always, like to acknowledge the fact that our cities and the places where we live and that we are appreciating wildlife from today are part of ancestral Tataviam and Tonga land, and they have a very, very long and active heritage of mindfulness about the land that we are on, the world that we are part of, and of naturalism, of caring for and safeguarding our natural habitats as well as the wildlife that lives there. So this morning, we will be discussing native Californian wildlife mammals. We've been working on getting to mammals. Now, as always, if you happen to have questions, comments, things you'd like to know about, anything you'd like me to go over in a little bit more detail, please feel free to toss those into our chat room this morning. I'll be keeping an eye on that. And I'll be happy to check in with you folks to see if you have any questions, anything you would like to ask at least a couple of times during the webinar. That said, let's go ahead and begin. So in the course of our webinar today, as always, we're going to be looking at a lot of different types of animals that are all native to North America. Some of them, however, are endemic, and this is a term from ecology and conservation biology that we've been using a lot over the last few episodes with a very, very specific meaning. An endemic species, whether it's plant or animal or fungus, anything, is a species that is found not just native to an area, but only that area. It means that its range is very, very specific. Part of the complication and the privilege of being here in Southern California specifically, and California at large, is that not only do we have such a wonderful variety of habitat, the classic adage that while in California you can go skiing in the morning and surfing by afternoon, provided it's the right time of year, isn't just true. It also really affects what kind of wildlife we can find here. That huge array of climate and habitat type means that there's room for a massive variety of wildlife to live alongside us. We've been gradually exploring that biodiversity over the last couple of weeks. So I want to please remind us of something that's been true every time we look at plants or wildlife diversity. This isn't even the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more than what we will get to discuss today. Today, we're going to have a mix of wildlife that you can see throughout the rest of North America, but that may be a little bit different here in California. We're going to be looking at species that are endemic here to California and specifically here to Southern California. As always, our talks focus on the biodiversity that you can see basically from about Santa Barbara or so southward. So from about Santa Barbara County down to about the Mexico border. We'll also be, pardon me, we'll also occasionally be discussing endangered species. Now, part of that biodiversity that lets us have such a massive variety of wildlife that we can see also means that as those endemic species lose areas of their range, as they lose habitat or lose space, because they are not found anywhere else. If we lose part of their population here, we also lose it worldwide because we don't see them anywhere else. So there will be some times when I'm going to point out to you a species or species group that is particularly impacted, that we can better appreciate them. Now, some of these you're going to be familiar with, like this photo right here. This is a famous photo that was taken by staff using uh, motion sensitive lights and cameras from the Los Angeles Natural History Museum. And this is one of our local mountain lions. So we're going to be talking about some species that are very charismatic and well known, and some that maybe you haven't seen before, but that live alongside you. All right, let's go ahead and start with that charismatic fellow. This is the mountain lion, Puma concolor. The mountain lion's a lot larger than some folks think. We tend to have a different sized population here than in the rest of North America. The average mountain lion is about 7 to 8 feet long from the tip of its nose to the tip of its tail. Males can be a little bit longer. These are a very, very low built animal. Mountain lions are gorgeous. They are apex predators, which means they have no natural predators themselves. And these are a species that are built for climbing. Some wild cats are built a lot taller than this. But if you look at this photo of this beautiful, healthy young mountain lion here on the lower right-hand side, they're built long and low. Look at how much longer this cat's body is than its legs are tall. This animal is built for climbing up cliffs, climbing up into trees. This is where they spend a lot of their time. They like secluded places for their dens. These are not a social species. They hunt solo, and unless it's a mother with cubs, or those cubs a little while after they've gotten old enough, they tend to live solo as well. They are designed for balance in that climbing as well. That really wonderful, super long tail, relative to the size of the rest of the body, is there to help them keep their balance while they're climbing, which is how you can get a 7 to 8 foot long cat balanced on a branch like this one here in the lower right hand side. They have the classic skull that we see amongst all felines. And we're going to cover today some ways that you can identify if you should happen to see the skull, or if you should happen to see the paw prints of a lot of these animals, how you can recognize them and start differentiating for yourself. While these animals tend to be shy, these are apex predators. You can see this here from the teeth in their skull. Their canine teeth, what we would know as their fangs, are very well developed, and they're evolved for hunting and holding on to prey. Like all other cats, and you'll see other examples of this later on, they have an eye socket and an eye that's much bigger relative to the rest of the size of their skull. And this is a sign of their excellent night vision. A large eye, whether it's in owls, like we looked at last week, or here in mountain lions and a little bit bobcats, a large eye relative to the size of the rest of the skull means really, really good dark vision. That means that there's a lot of space to let light reflect inside the eye. So they can just make better use of any little bit of light that is available. Now, come here. When we are out hiking, when we're out in the field for any reason, if you're lucky and conditions are good, you can see all sorts of different tracks, trail sign left by wildlife that have been through the area. And two of our most classic species to have a look at are the mountain lion and the coyote. Now, if you're out on a really, really well-trafficked trail, something really popular that has visitors all the time, you may also see the tracks of domestic dogs that are out hiking with their people. Here's how you can tell the difference between a feline paw print and a canid one. After that, trying to figure out what sort of species you're actually looking at is all a matter of relative size. So here's the basics. When I'm out in the field or when I'm out in the field with students, these are the signs about a paw print that I'm using to help me tell the difference and to help me identify what species I'm looking at there with my students. Uh, Use the palm of your hand as a reference point. If the shape of the paw print is much more square or circular, if it looks like if you scaled it down, if it's too big, if it would fit inside roughly the same sort of shape as the palm of your hand, you're looking at a feline paw print. Now, sometimes if we are really, really lucky, and conditions are absolutely perfect. You can even note whether or not there are the dots of claw points ahead of the toes. Now, cats, if you live with a cat, you already know this, have retractable claws. Which means when they run, when they need traction, they can extend those claws and get better traction, get better momentum. Of course, those claws are also used for holding on to prey. But when regularly walking, those claws are held in a retracted, pulled back position. So they don't indent the ground ahead of the wildcat's paws. See how, so this is an ideal situation here with this paw print example up the upper right hand side. This is really soft, clay rich mud that just, it holds a paw print like it was made for it, really. Uh, and likewise, the best time to go see paw prints in our local hills, our mountains, and trails is recently after a rain, when the soil's been loosened up a little, softened up a little. It'll hold a paw print much, much better and for a longer period of time. When you've got dry, hard pack, or a paved trail, this process becomes a lot more difficult, you can imagine. But if you happen to be on a dirt trail and you really would like to see animal tracks, paw prints, try and see really good examples of trail sign, give it a day or so after it's rained. And maybe try and get out there first thing in the morning before a whole bunch of fellow hikers have gotten out there before you, before those tracks have been walked over and obliterated. And you will have the best possible opportunity of seeing these paw prints in a pristine situation. You're also looking for, in addition to that round shape, no claw points ahead of the toes, you're also looking for the shape of the toes and the shape of the sort of the paw or heel pad, the center of the pad. Uh, Big cats, as fantastic predators as they may be, still have the same shape on their toe pads that cat owners everywhere fondly call toe beans. If you are not a cat owner, yes, we call them toe beans. Uh, no, it is what it is. They are oblong and sometimes teardrop shaped pads underneath the toes. The shape of the paw pad, depending on how clear a paw print you're looking at, may show three lobes, center of the palm, and one under either side to help cushion and distribute weight. Sort of like the same way we've got a massive muscle here at the base of the thumb, and again underneath the base of the pinky on either side of our hand. That would be sort of like two lobes. They've got a third muscular padded lobe here to sort of help like pad what would be the heel for them. If you look at something that's much more oval by comparison, that's the whole point of this. If you look at something that's much more oval and its shape is more like the shape of your entire hand, oval versus round. An oval paw pad, especially if you've got a really nice, clean example and you can see the tips of claws, nails really, ahead of the toes. This is a canid paw print. So if you see a large canid paw print, nice oval profile, oval outline, maybe you can even see where the the claws, the nails, the head, the toes are, you're looking at something canid. Now, that may be someone's dog, especially if you're on a really popular trail that folks may take their dogs running and jogging with them on. It, depending where you are, is also very, very likely to be one of our local coyotes. All right. Now, by comparison, so we were just looking at the mountain lion. Here's our other major local wildcat. This is Lynx rufus, our local bobcat. Now, we have got, as a note, so if you go talk about this with folks who live elsewhere in the US, they're going to be really confused about how large a bobcat you happen to be describing. Uh, Whereas if we think of a 6 foot tall human, a mountain lion can be 7 to 8 feet long, maybe a little bit longer in some males. A bobcat here in Southern California may come up to just below your knees and several feet long. And this is a lot bigger than folks tend to see in other areas of North America. We have a subspecies here, a related group that's a different population than other states that still get bobcats tend to see. We have an extension of the Mexican bobcat, and we just have bigger bobcats here specifically in Southern California than most states of the Union tend to see. So if you happen to say, go talk to somebody else about this webinar, and if they live elsewhere, they may be really confused about just how big a bobcat you are describing. And if you've ever seen our local bobcats, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's not some kind of misunderstanding. It's not that you're talking about completely different species. We are talking about different populations, different subspecies that don't tend to see each other very often. So there really is a physical difference. Again, however, we are seeing really well developed canines meant for holding on to prey and eyes that are very large relative to the size of the rest of the skull. We're also looking at a, uh, a skull that's much smoother and doesn't have a very long snout. In mammalogy, we call this snout a rostrum. So if you're looking at a more shortened face versus the nice long muzzle that you'd associate with a dog, cats tend to have a smaller, more smoothed down, a little bit shorter skull, really, really, really well set up for hunting at night or at dawn and dusk, uh, and with fangs that let them hold on to their prey. Our local bobcats tend to go after smaller prey, jackrabbits and smaller. Our mountain lions can take down basically anything that they would like to that's a prey species. They have strong enough jaws and necks, they can even pull deer up into a tree so that they can eat it in safety and privacy. Now, by comparison, I was just talking about that nice, long, well-developed muzzle, that rostrum that we tend to see on dogs and their relatives. Here is one of our classic examples. This is Canis latrans, our local coyote. And note how much longer the skull is. So this is an animal whose specialty is not night vision. Look at how much smaller the eyes are relative to the rest of the skull. But I tell you what they are fantastic at. That really long muzzle stretches out their sinus passages, and it makes for all of this really complex bony structure inside their sinuses. The longer and more complex those structures are, the better the sense of smell that animal is going to have. If you look at a human being, ours is unfortunately very, very simple. Our world isn't really defined by perfume and by odor the way it is for some other species. If you look at anything related to dogs, though, and especially some dogs like bloodhounds that we've really bred for having an incredible sense of smell, they just leave us in the dust. Their world is defined by an incredibly rich, powerful, detailed world of odor. This is why dogs and their relatives can track animals for miles. We've got documents of coyotes and especially wolves in their range, say over in Yellowstone National Park, tracking moose and deer, tracking animals that they're hunting for food
for miles and miles, even for days. Sometimes, in the case of the wolf, these dramatic, these pursuits, these hunts, even when they're not even successful, can go on for 20 miles or more. And sometimes a lot of that is without the wolf pack even being able to see the animal they're tracking. They're doing it by smell. In the world of domestic dogs, goodness, bloodhounds and their relative similar breeds of dog literally have a sense of smell that's better than 50 times stronger and more acute than yours or mine. It's in their world, by comparison, we're we're deaf and blind. There's so much that we're missing. And they've been bred for it in that case. But dogs in general and all of their relatives tend to have really good acute senses of smell, and this is why. This is why their world is so different. In the same way that your world and mine tends to usually be dominated by what we can see. We've got really wonderful color vision that cats and dogs and their relatives don't completely lack. That's actually a misnomer. A lot of folks still think that cats and dogs and all of their relatives see completely in shades of gray and black and white. And that's not actually completely true, which is lovely. It means that they're missing out on less. But their color spectrum that they can see doesn't stretch as far as ours does as human beings. Uh, Cats make up for that with, frankly, night vision that's a lot better than ours. There's a reason if you have a cat at home, your cat can walk very comfortably around your home in the middle of the night with no other lights and not bump into anything. Whereas we might try and, get to the kitchen for a drink of water in the middle of the night and clip ourselves on practically every single piece of furniture that's available. Uh, Dogs, on the other hand, have this wonderful sense of smell. Uh, our coyotes, the same way that our bobcats are a good bit bigger here, specifically in Southern California, than a lot of other areas in the US are seeing. Our coyotes are also larger. So, again, if you're ever comparing wildlife notes with folks who live in other areas of the US, it's not that you are at all wrong about how large our wildlife is. It really is a different size. Checking the chat room. Yeah, absolutely, and especially a lot of our alert dogs that are formally trained have specific training to pay attention to specific smells and to track their owners, so that if anything ever happens to you, they are on the alert at all times. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Marcia. Thank you for tossing that in the chat room. All right. So we've done three of our most charismatic species. When we talk about an animal having charisma in terms of, say, conservation, we're talking about wildlife that people can really feel a connection with. And a lot of our charismatic species tend to be mammals. Uh, they are majestic or adorable. Today, we're definitely looking at both. Uh, our common gray fox is both beautiful and adorable. Our foxes are small. The common gray fox and its relative, the island gray fox, Urocyon littoralis in the case of the gray foxes, and Cinerea argenteus in the case of the gray fox. These guys are little. These guys are a lot little than most people think they are. When most folks think of foxes, they think of like the red fox, and we were just looking at that a moment ago here on this size comparison diagram. Red fox is maybe 7 to 30 pounds. 7 is really extremely tiny. 25 pounds, 23 to 25 pounds is more on average for a red fox. They're a big fox. Our gray foxes are very, very small. They are light built. Our gray foxes, their various species, they're about the size of a large house cat. Really, they're not very big at all. They are mostly fur. They are beautiful, though. They are shy. They're social with each other, and we'll frequently see them living in mated pairs, even outside of the breeding season. But they're very shy from people. Uh, they are little predators. They'll go for rodents. They'll even go for big insects. And This is definitely an example of an endemic species that's having a hard time. Now, mountain lions are having a hard time, not because they are being hunted by other wildlife. They don't have very many natural predators. To wit, they don't have any natural predators. But mountain lions are having a terribly hard time because of habitat loss. It takes about 12 square miles or so of hunting territory to feed one mountain lion. And there's not a whole lot of unbroken up space, good habitat where they can find a lot of prey that doesn't also share space with people. There are some examples of our gray foxes that are having a hard time for a whole other reason on top of this. Our island gray foxes are all of them are, frankly, they are desperately endangered, and a lot of them are close to extinction. The reason for this is our island gray foxes are a different subspecies on every single one of the Channel Islands because they are isolated and they cannot get from one island to the other. And the fact that they are isolated is not a problem in and of itself. It's part of what's led them to become different subspecies over time. However, when they start to lose habitat on those islands, they have literally physically nowhere else where they live naturally at all, period. They're not just endemic here to Southern California, they're endemic to each and every single one of those specific islands. And so, if anything at all happens to every single one of those small populations, it affects the worldwide population of that whole species. And because of this, four of the six different species of island gray fox are very, very endangered, and all of them are having a really hard time. If you ever get an opportunity to help protect them or help provide opportunities, grant funding, anything to help protect them, they can really use your help. They are beautiful, though, and shy. Back on the mainland, an animal that sometimes we have a problem with for being a little too successful about living around people is the black bear. All right, Ursus americanus, the classic American bear. Now, these bears are not necessarily as big as you might think. From tip of the nose to tip of the tail, they're maybe 5 to 6 feet long. Only a couple of feet tall at the shoulder, maybe 3 feet in the really, really big ones. And they're not as heavy as the grizzly bear. And we don't really get the grizzly bear naturally here in Southern California anymore. We did it one time. There's a reason why there's a bear on our state flag. But we've unfortunately hunted the grizzly bear out of the range it used to have here in Southern California. So if you're in a local campground or hiking, and you happen to hear a bear come through or see a bear, it's not going to be a grizzly bear, it is a black bear. Now, that doesn't mean that all black bears are black. Some black bears are actually brown, so there is some variety in color. If you happen to see tracks, here's what you're looking for here in the upper right-hand corner. The front foot shows a really large, heavy pad, 5 toes, and the toes are in much more of a broad arch than you're going to see in cats and dogs or their relatives. You also, if you've got a really good example, see the tips of their much longer claws out ahead of those toes. The forefoot, the front foot, you might just see the paw pad. You might also see a little bit of their elbow pad if they've sat for a moment. Their hind foot, that pad comes all the way back. Bears walk on their feet in a similar way to the way we do. So the same way that we've got our foot is elongated and you've got that long arch from the back of your heel to the front of your toes, look for a similar-ish shape in the hind feet of bears. It's one of the best ways to tell when you're looking at a bear paw print. It's a larger paw print than the vast majority of other wildlife you're going to see, and it's also the only one that's going to have that long, really long, more human-like from tip of the toes to the back of the heel in the hind feet kind of shape. Now, some of the wildlife we've been talking about, it is obviously not good for human beings to mix with. So let's take a moment here and talk about wildlife safety. And we've talked about this a little bit in context of reptiles, specifically rattlesnakes, that you may not necessarily want to share a whole bunch of trail space with. Uh, Mammals like coyotes, bears, and mountain lions. You may be a little bit less likely to see on a trail. The vast majority of these species do not tend to seek out human company. And if they hear you coming, moving through the habitat, the vast majority of the time, truly the vast majority of the time, they are going to leave. However, when you are sleeping overnight in a campground, you may see them, you may hear them come through. So if you happen to ever encounter these species, treat them with respect. Do not turn your back on a wild animal that may be dangerous to you, regardless of what type. Make sure you know where that animal is. Just back away slowly. You want to back away. You want to get away from them and make sure that there is a very, very clear distance between you and them. Now, in the case specifically of larger mammals like mountain lions, coyotes, and bears, you also want to make sure that you very, very clearly indicate to the animal you are not prey. You are not an animal for them to come investigate. The easiest way for you to do this is for you to make yourself look as big and troublesome as possible. Do not run from them. Prey runs. Food runs away from a mountain lion. All right? Do not put yourself into the category of food. Make sure that animal understands very clearly you are not on today's menu. Stand up tall, spread your legs shoulder length apart, raise your hands well above your shoulders, spread your body out. Make yourself look as big as possible. Be as loud as possible. Yell, roar, all right? Make yourself very, very clearly not look like food. It's the clearest indication you can give that you are not to be messed with. Uh, the vast majority of the time, any animal that sees this kind of display is going to be frightened off, is going to be chased away from you. It's using very simple indicators of body language and vocalization, basically to send a message they can understand. Hi, leave me alone now. As someone who studies animal behavior formally, if I had to give you an area of specialty for my research, I'm an animal behaviorist. Uh, Using signals that you can understand, that whatever animal you have to interact with can also understand, is the best way to maintain your safety. And that is by not running, backing away slowly, spreading out your body, staying upright, making yourself look as big as you can, and being as loud as you possibly can. Really, really clearly send that message. Now, in the case of bears specifically, honestly, the vast majority of the time bears have any kind of interaction with people here in Southern California is because we bring tasty, tasty food to campgrounds. And this has led them to sometimes come down into neighborhoods. Towns up in the mountains like Big Bear see this problem all the time, but so do towns at the foothills. And that includes Monrovia and Altadena and Pasadena and, La Crescenta. All kinds of areas. Santa Clarita will get bears, and it's because they're after food. It's because they're after food. And they have learned that human beings and our presence mean tasty, tasty food at all times of year. So they have learned, unfortunately, really, really well in some cases, uh, that we provide a food source even if we are not food ourselves. So do be cautious if you live or you're hiking around the foothills. It is bear territory, the same way that is mountain lion territory. The vast majority of the time, bears are not a danger to us, but it doesn't mean that they don't get themselves into trouble when they go after food, and it leads them into dangerous situations. As a brief note, before we get into other species, um, hunting species, predators like coyotes, mountain lions, and even bobcats are why it is so important to keep your pets indoors. All right, bears will interact with domestic dogs, and sometimes they get into fights. Dog versus bear does not go well for the dog. Indoor outdoor cats are small enough to be food. They are small enough to be food for mountain lions, for coyotes, even for bobcats. Even though they are very small predators themselves, that does not keep them safe. So please keep your cats indoors. It will keep them safe and in your life, nice and healthy for a much longer period of time. All right, now verging straight into the adorable. The ringtail is native to our desert regions. If you want to see one, you're going to have to be very lucky, though. While they are not endangered and their populations are actually doing really well, ringtails are notoriously shy. They live out and around the Mojave Desert. So if you ever take the drive, say from the LA Orange County area out to Las Vegas, and you drive through the Mojave National Park, Mojave Desert National Park, you'll be driving through their area, but they are nocturnal, so they're awake and active at night, and they are adorable but shy, very shy in some cases. These guys, if you look at the skull here, they're little predators. They eat mice, rats, and also lizards, sometimes snakes, and large insects. And they're adorable. They're very fast, very, very nimble, and very good climbers. All right. The classic, one of the two classic, most anthropogenic species that we deal with. Now, we introduced this word during our last talk on birds. An anthropogenic species is one that deals really, really well with living around human beings. And raccoons and later possums are the masters of this. If I had to tell you maybe the top three most anthropogenic mammals that we live alongside every single day, and you might not even be aware of them, raccoons are probably the top of the list, up there with possums and maybe coyotes. They are relatively intelligent. They are really crafty about finding food, which is why they deal so well with living around human beings. They've got a really wide variety to their diet, which means that anything you can eat, a raccoon can eat too, even if it's not particularly healthy for them. They are very, very crafty about getting in and out of places where their sensitive nose tells them food is available. Our raccoons out here, because they can get a little too well fed on food that's not terribly good for them, our raccoons can get very, very large. A male raccoon can get upwards of 25 pounds, sometimes up to 30 pounds. So these locally that live around human beings, that get all of that benefit from being around human beings because they get access to our food, even our trash. They can get very, very big. They can get a little tubby, but they are really well adapted for a wide variety of food that opens up a whole bunch of options for them. They just deal extremely well with living around us. Next up, also living well around human beings, are skunks. Now, we actually have a couple different species out here. We've got the striped skunk that everybody knows. We also have the western spotted skunk, although down here in Southern California, the striped skunk is definitely more common. These little guys are a lot smaller than you might think they are. I know a lot of the time I keep saying, hey, this wildlife is bigger than you might think. These guys are actually really little. See this paw print here? From the tips of its claws all the way to the very, very back of its paw is less than 2 inches long. That's that. That right there. So these guys are very little. They are predators, if you see by the teeth. They are mostly nocturnal. They tend to be shy. If you happen to see a skunk, it's normally leaving or just going about its business. They don't tend to be aggressive. They do have that famous spray, but it is a last ditch, last effort to try and defend themselves from being hurt. So if they start doing a handstand in some species or turning around and presenting you with the business end of their tail, it's because they're frightened. Just like any other form of wildlife, if you want to avoid any kind of unpleasant interaction, just give them space. If they're feeling scared, you can solve that situation very handily just by backing off a little bit. Leave them alone a little bit, and they will proceed about their business. They'll try and get away from you, and then you don't have to worry about spray anymore. Again, this is unfortunately a species that sometimes our outdoor pets don't interact well with. If anybody has ever had a dog come back into the house with a powerful new smell on it, as we've definitely had when I was a kid, um, this is a species that you don't want your pets to interact with and bring home that fresh sulfur-rich smell. Delightful. Can't get that out of your walls forever. Uh, Solve that by just making sure that we keep some space from these animals. So keep your pets indoors, and they will hopefully stay smelling cleaner a little bit longer. All right, and of course, we've got the opossum. Now this one's fun. Okay, I know a lot of folks aren't super fond about the possum, but it's got a bad rep it really doesn't deserve. This is the only marsupial that is native to North America. Check that one out. So the whole variety of wildlife that Australia is famous for, we have one of. We have one of. Some folks get turned off because of that bare tail, like a rat's tail, but it's a really great adaptation. They use it to help them keep their balance and stability while they're climbing and they're moving around. They're a useful little predator. They go after insects and earthworms. They're really wonderful to have in an ecosystem. They help keep the balance of detritivores, that is, insects and earthworms that break down dead matter. They help keep those populations from getting too big. They're peaceful, they're not aggressive. If they feel threatened, they'll try and make a scary display. This is called alligator mouthing. And that's what this animal here is doing in this photo. They will try and be as scary as they can, but they're not aggressive. They're not going to come after you. They don't look especially charismatic. Like Australia has all of the really impressive marsupials. We have the Virginia opossum. Um, but the most they can do is they can try and like rear back and they'll open their mouth and they'll hiss really loud. And it's as ferocious as they can know to be, but give them some space. They would like to get away. They'd like to go about the rest of their evening's work. They're nocturnal as well. All right. Got as many species as we've got. There are so many more. We've got mule deer. We also get white-tailed deer out here. You can definitely know them by their tracks, okay? Nothing else out here leaves tracks like a deer does. Out here in Southern California, in the LA area, we get mule deer in our hills and especially in the summer coming down into municipal areas for water. So if you're ever out hiking first thing in the morning, if you're quiet, they may come by. Our mule deer are used to people in some cases. They may come crashing through people's gardens, but they are a primary prey species for a lot of our larger predators. And if you're lucky while you're hiking, you may hear them. They are both very graceful and very clumsy, which sounds like an odd thing to say. Running and leaping through the underbrush, they look just graceful as heck. You know, I can never do that. If you hear them moving through tall brush, however, it sounds like they're a little bit drunk. They just go crashing through the underbrush, and you can hear a deer moving through like the thick, the dense bushes like the bottom of the canyon, and it just sounds like crash, 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 rustle, 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 crash, 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 like deer. Yeah. If you hear something loud like that, like down the bottom of a ravine, odds are really good you're hearing deer. And you wouldn't think it to look at them, right? They're beautiful. When they leap, they're so graceful. It just sounds like a real racket. I see I've got a question from the chat room. Oh, about skunks. Okay, so the question is, if a skunk sprays, can they do it again right away, or does it have to do something to activate that again? Uh, I was told it was like if we crack our knuckles, we have to wait a while to be able to do it again. I can never verify this fact. Of course, I was not going to test this out. That's certainly wise. No, do not test this. Skunks have a gland at the base of their tail, just inside that anal opening, that lets them secrete that spray. Uh, and like anything the body makes, it takes a little while to make more. That doesn't mean that they have to use all of it in one spray, though. Uh, Adults have more control over this. They also have a larger capacity to make more. So sometimes they can spray right away if you happen to startle a very young skunk. Um, they may get a little too scared, more so than is necessary, and spray with absolutely everything they've got all in one go. Uh, a little over enthusiastic about it. An adult has more control, which means they may not use all of the spray they have, and they may be able to spray right away again. So it depends on how old and how much control the animal is, and also like how familiar the animal is with this particular threat. Skunks that are really, really familiar with people tend to be more tolerant if they have an understanding and have the experience with human beings often enough and understand that humans tend to leave them alone. They may not spray at all. It's a matter of how much control, how old is the animal, and how scared are they feeling. Hmm. That's a wonderful question. Thank you for that. All right, we have so many other things I want to show you. Oh my god, there's just so much. But really, this is all just the tip of the iceberg. If you go down into Anza Borrego, in the high desert next to San Diego, you may see bighorn sheep, or actually even out in our Mojave Desert. We have bighorn sheep here in Southern California. They are a threatened species. This particular subspecies is endemic here to Southern California, although other bighorn sheep, different subpopulations, are definitely elsewhere in North America. But a lot of people don't even know they're down here. Okay, we have so many different types of rodents. We have wood rats and pocket mice. I love deer mice. Can I talk to you about deer mice for just a moment? Deer mice and deer rats are adorable. Look at this guy. He's a little puffball. You're in the uppermost right hand corner. They're a big kangaroo like pair of feet and a long tail, hence the name. They hop just like a kangaroo or a wallaby. They can turn on a pin. They're really, really sensitive nocturnal animals. Their sense of hearing is amplified by those long, long feet. See how that long foot rests on the ground all the way to the back of the heel when they're standing? They can pick up the vibrations of animals moving along the ground and even underground near them through the bones of their feet, and it gets rooted up to the base of the ears. And the area of the skull under the ears that funnels sound waves into the nerves of the brain is so much larger than it is on most animals. They've got a ridiculous sense of hearing. One of the most incredible things, however, is about a completely different form of survival. Kangaroo rats and mice do not need to drink water. This completely alien concept for them, to the point where if we have deer rats and mice that like we're studying in captivity, you don't need to put drinking water into their enclosure, and if you did, they wouldn't know what to do with it. If you gave them a pool of water, they might try and bathe in it a little bit, maybe just a little bit, but they have no impulse to drink water. The same way that virtually any other animal, if presented with a pool of clean water that they can drink, will have the thirst impulse to go drink. It's making me thirsty just talking about it. They don't. That instinct does not exist for them at all. Uh, Instead, all of the water that they need, they can get out of their diet. They eat insects and seeds, and their bodies are so adapted for living in the desert. and for dealing without water at all, that everything they need, they can just get out of their diet. It's incredible. It's a completely different way of surviving. Uh, our lives would be massively different if we were anything like this. Other animals in our area are rabbits and hares, brush rabbits, the desert cottontail, and the black-tailed jackrabbit, which is, again, an animal that's a lot bigger than a lot of people think it is. Jackrabbit height and size isn't all just about ears, although their ears are huge compared to anything else you'll see, even other rabbits. They are tall, leggy, fast, wily. They don't like to be around human beings. These are typically shy animals. You may find very, very young rabbits in the spring, and they'll be shy, but they don't necessarily have all the instinct to run from people yet. Jackrabbits are shy, and they are fast. They leave quickly. Those giant ears are all about thermoregulation. Living out in our native habitats like coastal sage scrub and chaparral, when it gets really hot, those massive ears have all of these blood vessels, and it lets them cool their body down by heat dumping, by just getting rid of a whole bunch of extra body heat through all of that really thin skin. And yes, of course, they have an incredible sense of hearing, as you might guess. All right. Goodness. All right. I want to make sure that we get to some of our marine mammals. So some of these I'm going to go through fairly briefly. Shrews are related to rodents. They are, however, they're little predators. They go after primarily things like earthworms in the right area, even scorpions, but things like grasshoppers and crickets really, really heavily. We do have a couple of shrew species that are here in native California, native to California, that are heavily endangered because they're losing their habitat. And these are little guys. See how easily one might fit into the palm of your hand. Little. All right. Now we start to get into some species that are frequently misunderstood. Here in Southern California, we live underneath a migratory pathway for bats. We also have resident bats that are here all year round, and a lot of bats are misunderstood, but they're desperately necessary for our native ecology. We have so many different species that pass over through our airspace at different times of year. We've got all of these different species that come up out of northern Mexico, and a lot of these species will live here year round in Southern California. Some of these are pollinators. A lot of them eat insects. If you're not a fan of having large insects, buzz into you at night, then you ought to be a fan of bats, who are some of their most important predators, and keep those insect populations under control. Moving into some of our marine species. Southern California is host to a major coastal area, and I would be desperately remiss and not showing things to you that really you deserve to get to see if I didn't show you some of our marine species. Our sea otters are a classic example, and they are recuperating. This is a species that is an endangered species success story, I'm really glad to say. At one period, our sea otters were hunted almost completely to extinction. In fact, local populations here around LA, San Diego, and Santa Barbara were hunted completely to the death of those populations. And you couldn't find sea otters until you got up to Monterey, like Morro Bay, or above. And over time, as these species have gained popularity, as sea otters have gotten protection, as their habitats have started to recover south of Monterey and south of Morro Bay, uh, they have slowly returned to our area. They are still not common down in the LA area around our coast, but you can now see them from time to time. They are really important predators for our local marine ecosystems. Some of their favorite prey, sea urchins, really affect the health of our kelp forests, which areas like Santa Catalina Island and our other Channel Islands are world famous for. So seeing these otters finally come back when we lost them almost completely and permanently is a major success story. It's nice to see them back. Other marine species include all of our different species of seals and sea lions. Now, a really common question that I hear all the time from students when I go out into the field with them is, how do I tell the difference between seals and sea lions? Well, here are the major things that you can look for. If you happen to see a close enough view, sea lions have a little ear flap outside that's external to their skull. Like, here's a large California sea lion. This is a sea lion bull male. These are big animals. All right, come back. And you can see a little ear outside their skull. Seals, on the other hand, have a very, very, very smooth, streamlined back of the skull, and you won't see any external ear. All right. Even this guy, this is a northern elephant seal. This male here with that big, impressive schnoz has a smooth back of the head. He's still a seal, even though he's enormous. So these are animals that even though some of them are adorable, the fur seal species, pardon me, our fur seal species are adorable. Our harbor seals are adorable. But seals and sea lions are large wildlife. Their bite would definitely be dangerous. You definitely want to leave these animals plenty of space. In the case of the California sea lion, Steller sea lion, and the northern elephant seal, these animals are easily large enough to do you injury and defend themselves very, very well. So if you see these animals drawn up on a beach, leave them alone. Take photos, look your fill, appreciate them. Some are beautiful, some are adorable, some are just impressive in size, but leave them in peace. All right. The other major way for you to tell the difference that is useful from a distance is how they move around. See how this seal draws himself up in sort of a U shape, and even this elephant seal just sort of drapes himself out on the sand. But this California sea lion can kind of tuck its hind flippers and tail up underneath it a little bit. They can also walk on those hind flippers. So sea lions can walk on their hind flippers. Seals, even big seals, cannot. And they have to do that sort of caterpillar-like motion to sort of galumph along the beach by sort of like belly walking along the beach. Sea lions can actually get up on their fore flippers and their hind flippers and kind of waddle walk along the beach a little bit. This is because sea lions still have a vestigial pelvis, even though they're a marine mammal and they don't need to walk very often. They still have a little bit of a hip bone, a pelvic girdle there at the base of their tail. And that means that they can kind of bend and orient those hind flippers under them and actually help them get around a little bit. So if you see a seal or sea lion and it's able to kind of like tuck its tail up like that or walk a little bit on it, you're looking at a sea lion, not a seal. If you have a closer view, just make sure you're leaving it plenty of space, and you see an external ear, again, sea lion, not seal. All right, almost to the end. And so much. This is why I'm like, remember, this is not even the tip of the iceberg for our wildlife. Man, have we got porpoises here. We've got dolphins, we've got porpoises. We have species that live around Southern California all year long, like the common bottlenose dolphin. We also have some really, really endangered species, like the short-beaked common dolphin, has been very hard hit by tuna fishing. This is one of those species why some tuna brands are specifically marked dolphin safe. We've lost so much of this species population because they get caught in the same nets as the tuna. And unfortunately, when they get caught, they frequently are killed. So some of these, like the northern right whale dolphin, we only see seasonally. They're migratory. They come up here periodically at the right time of year. But some, like again, the bottlenose dolphin and the long-nosed common dolphin, they're here all year long. And if you're lucky at the beach, off the side of the coast, or if you're out on a boat, you might very well see them. Next one's it's our last slide. It's the longest slides of the entire presentation. It's our whales. Look, we have the same way that we have got migratory pathways for insects, for birds, for bats, for dolphins. Here along the long coast of California, we have some of the most important migratory pathways for whales in the entire world. There's a reason why whale watching is such a major industry along the Californian coast. We just have the most incredible privilege. We see beaked whales, sperm whales even. We see the blue whale from time to time. Um, we see the humpback whale, which is so well differentiated by that really small dorsal fin and that big white slap zone on the underside of its fluke, the underside of its tail. Uh, please be aware, these animals are very charismatic. They are beautiful. They are large. They are world travelers. And they are incredibly endangered, many of them. Uh, a lot of these species, even species that have gotten support and protection here in the US, like the humpback whale, are still endangered worldwide, and some of them are critically endangered, like the North Pacific right whale. Uh, we have the very good fortune of seeing them along our coast in the way that most of the rest of the world will never get to see them. But boy, they really need our help. So it is wonderful to be aware of the variety and the privilege that we have when we get to see whales and dolphins along our coast. Now, I think that we had a question from the chat room. This is also right toward the end of our presentation today. So if anybody has any other questions, any comments, anything else you'd like to toss into the chat room, now is an excellent time. Sylvia, you're very welcome. Uh, it's really true. We live with wildlife all the time, and a lot of folks just aren't aware of it. There are so many animals of all the different types that we've been discussing over the last few weeks that live extremely successfully alongside human beings. And honestly, when you go out walking to your car or taking a hike, the odds are you're probably a lot closer to your local wildlife than you might realize that you are. It's just that a lot of them are shy, and a lot of them are very good at hiding, and a lot of them are just really incredibly successful at taking advantage to living alongside us. What it is important to do, and what I hope that you get out of the last several weeks of our discussion of wildlife here on Wild California, is how to better appreciate when you do get to see wildlife, what to do, how to handle that experience when you do, and maybe how to understand what you're seeing. The more that we can understand and appreciate who we're living alongside, hopefully the more sensitive and more successful we can be in our role of living alongside wildlife. Hey, I see we've got a question about coyotes. Oh yeah, Rancho Los Cerritos does indeed get a lot of coyote visitors. Um, Here's the thing. So coyotes are not actually completely nocturnal. And actually, thank you for bringing that up. That's a really common misunderstanding. A lot of folks think that and may only see coyotes at night. Uh, Actually, they're what we call crepuscular. Crepuscular means that this is an animal that is active at dawn and at dusk, so at either end of the day, but they're not necessarily active all night long. Sometimes, but not necessarily. Uh, Also, part of what lets coyotes live really successfully around human beings is the fact that they can extend those hours that they're active. If you're seeing them around your area, during the day, they may be just heading out to hunt, like in the very, very early evening, or they may be just coming home. If you see them, especially like in the early morning, and you see them in the same area in the early morning, they are probably headed home to their den after the end of a night of hunting and trying to find food. So if you're seeing them really, really often, hopefully they are not sick. Hopefully they are not starving. But it may mean that they live near you, that their burrow is near you. Again, this is definitely a situation where you want to keep your pets indoors. Uh, it is it is much easier, and yes, I'm going to be biased about this. I am a biologist and I am a pet owner. It is much easier and safer to keep our pets out of harm's way by keeping them indoors rather than try to get rid of our local wildlife. For one thing, there's nothing wrong with our wildlife being local. It is their territory, it is their habitat, we are living in their area. But if you happen to have pets that you let outdoors at all times of night, that are indoor outdoor pets, I would really please like to make the case that keep them indoors. At the very least, at night, keep your pets indoors. Um, Typically, when say animal control gets called on wildlife because it's put someone's pet in danger, that never ends well for the wildlife. They're not there to protect the wildlife, they're there to resolve the situation. So if you have any kind of value, if you hold any value for our local wildlife, and you would also like your pets to be safe, keep them home. That way we can avoid any kind of danger or negative interaction between our pets and wildlife to begin with. It is the fastest, easiest way to guarantee both our pets and our wild animals stay safe. Well, thank you for joining me this morning. I'm so glad to get to talk to you about these animals. And I hope it's helped you become a little bit more aware of who some of our neighbors are, shy though they might be, small though some of them might be. I hope you'll join us again next week. As a note, we will be taking a break. As far as I'm aware of right now, I'll let you know if that changes. We'll be taking a break for Thanksgiving, and I do hope that you'll have a lovely one. But next week, before Thanksgiving, we'll be talking about our relationship with wildfire and the history that our local area has with wildfire in general. Guess what? Our ecology can actually make use of it. So, how do we balance this out and do this right? We'll be talking about it next Saturday. Have a wonderful week. I look forward to talking with you more then. Bye, folks.